Can you tell us something about Rabo Bank's interest in financing renewable energy projects? When did the bank make renewable energy a focus of its lending and financing businesses?
Okay, let's step back a bit, and if you look at Rabobank, what it is, it's a cooperative bank of Holland, a bank which is focused on food and agriculture for the last about 110 years, and it was originally owned by the farmers of Holland, and they're still shareholders of Rabobank. So the roots are in agriculture, and agriculture and environment go hand in hand. That's one. And secondly, the Netherlands, as you know, is a very conscientious country as regards environment, and they are not only preaching but they are also practicing. And Rabobank is the largest bank in Holland, and being a cooperative bank into food and agriculture, I think the overall environment as an issue is paramount in Rabobank. And you may try to say sustainable development is paramount, but let's make it exchangeable in that sense, the two terms. If you look at sustainable development or environment, I think renewable energy comes right absolutely downstream as a subsidiary concept of sustainable development. Holland by itself has been extremely, what should I say, a leader, a pioneer in terms of renewable energy. Wind power has been there for many, many years. So they have also done a little bit of solar. They have done a lot of biomass. And as you know, agriculture means agri-waste biomass as a resultant, byproducts, which have been used very effectively by Holland. So Rabo has been actually involved in the projects in Holland to finance them for a very long period. So the knowledge has also been imbibed in Rabobank on renewable energy. That's the bank in Holland. And since everybody else or every location of Rabobank also practices what the head office does, so it comes very naturally down to every country, and rightly so in Asia as well. Having said this, renewable energy for international operations has been reiterated last year again by our chairman, and he says that this is going to be the theme of the future. And not wrongly again, because climate change, global warming, all of these concepts are now uppermost in everybody's mind. With all the calamities which we've been seeing over the last few years, right, and the disaster staring in our face, so to say, I think you cannot run away from it anyway, right? So for a bank like Rabobank, it is a natural adoption of this very critical theme now to progress.
On the international scale.
On the scale.
Yeah. So prior to that, it was important, but it wasn't something that it was like the biggest focus.
No, you see, it's like this. It was always important, but these are all the things where you have to have the necessary knowledge before you start funding. I mean, after all, we're a bank. A bank means what? That essentially we're going to lend money. If you want to lend money without having knowledge in a particular segment, I think you're up for disaster. And Rabo is a knowledge-driven bank. So whatever we do, we try to do it right. So first we build up a knowledge, then we start accessing or financing that sector.
What kind of knowledge are you talking about?
Generally about renewable energy as such, how wind power projects work, what are the risks involved, how they should be assessed, and then we go from there.
Especially on the international markets.
Also local market.
And the local markets.
Also local market. So internationally now we are getting a little bit more comfortable in assessing renewable energy projects. That's one. But also let's come back to Asia, which is our immediate, this thing. Within Asia, as you know, renewable energy is not something which has been practiced for very, very long, right?
It's a fairly recent thing.
Sporadically, yes, but as a concerted effort, no, right? So what is happening in Asia is that now that it is catching up, the governments were not so conscious. We are all busy using fossil fuels, essentially coal, which has to be the first resort of in terms of feedstock. Everybody had to. Energy consumption was increasing. You had to resort to the closest source. The closest source was coal. Everybody went to coal. From coal, you progress to oil and gas. Now, oil and gas is not so much here, But in Asia, West Asia, yes, and now reserves are being found. But when you talk of wind, when you talk of solar, you talk of biomass, that's a different paradigm.
Just a quick check. Um, is Rabobank always been active in the fossil fuel business, financing coal development projects?
No.
None.
No,
So
it's not been
is
active.
Is that a conscious policy not to touch coal?
It's a conscious policy. Environment, as I told you, has been uppermost in mind. And, way back, it must have been realized that coal-based power generation is environmentally polluting.
What about oil and gas then?
Oil and gas, yes, in bits and pieces. But once again, I must say that we adhere to the same standards as, let's say, a World Bank would do or International Finance Corporation would do in terms of environment. So if we do not have our own checklist, and as a bank, there's a limitation to which you can be, let's say, technically qualified to do that, but then we adopt those. So we don't touch projects which we know consciously that they are environmentally not sound. We don't do that. So
It sounds like Greenpeace. Greenpeace, for example, does not endorse coal power projects.
yeah, I, probably it's not safe or good to relate yourselves to NGOs, let's say, or any other or category of organizations. But yes, in general, in principle, we will not support projects which are environmentally unsound. We won't do it. That's a conscious policy.
Sure. Okay. Tell us, in your estimation, what is the size of the financing market for renewable energy projects in Asia? You mentioned that quite recently, this has become a conscious market for a lot of people, and governments are starting to emphasize it. How large do you think this market is in Asia?
See, let's relate it to the kind of potential which exists for renewable energy in Asia. Now, once again, it's a very, very difficult item to assess, but yes, there have been all kinds of assessments made for China, India, Indonesia, and wherever. If you look at how much capacity or how much potential for renewable projects really, which we call as the technically accessible capacity, that is something which we had to look at. I would imagine that there is still room to generate something like 200,000 megawatts of renewable power in Asia, and that will include all kinds of renewable energy, which is wind, solar, hydro, which is important, geothermal, bio, all of that combined. And this is something which is known as of today.
Which would be the biggest markets? No surprises, Japan, India and China would be the two big ones.
That is true. That is true for renewables, yes. Indonesia also actually can follow quite closely, but the developments in Indonesia are definitely not as fast as China and India at the moment.
Size is one thing, but do you reckon these markets are profitable? Would it be worth the while of the bank to go and lend for solar projects in China, for example?
Yeah. I think in general, bank would only lend to a project which is profitable, right? And not only profitable at a glimpse, but on more of a long-term sustainable basis. I must admit that many of these renewable projects become viable with certain incentives given by the governments today. They could be fiscal, they could be non-fiscal, but they mostly require incentives. And the reason is simple, that as long as the technological evolution still is not as much as in, let's say, coal. I mean, coal has become so standard that I think anybody with his eyes closed would know that, okay, 10,000 megawatts of capacity, what would it cost, what would be the returns, right? But in these cases, it's not all that standard still. So as research goes on, analysis goes on, evolution goes on, I think technology is developing, so the project costs are being crunched, right? And governments are now setting up regulations. For instance, in India, one of the states has gone ahead and saying that there is compulsory buying of renewable power. So those things become important. So bank looks at all those things, that what is the technical capability, What is going to be the incentives given? Are they sustainable over the project life or not? But in summary, I think in many countries like China, India specifically, some of these renewable power projects categories are definitely viable now. Wind is one of them, both in China and India. Hydro is becoming increasingly popular. China has already practiced it. India is now getting into bigger hydropower projects.
Right.